Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Linda and I make videos about life in Canada. If you're not new here and just subscribed and you're part of the community, thank you so much for supporting my channel and thank you so much for coming back to watch another video. So as you can tell by the title of today's video, I am going to be sharing with you how I finally got my PR application approved and just the little things that I learned throughout the process and some of the things that I think if you're going through the PR application you should look out for. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. Let's start off by going through the timeline of when I started applying for my PR application and how long it took for me to finally get my PR application approved and then receive my PR card. So I would say I started applying for my PR or preparing for it at around May or June last year, so June 2021. And just before I go into the timeline, actually to clarify, I applied for my PR through the Canadian Express Entry. And so there's different ways to apply for a PR in Canada, but this one is available for if you were in Canada and you studied in Canada and then you worked in Canada. There are different ways to get a PR. I'm only speaking for the Canadian Express Entry, so I won't be touching on the other channels because I don't really know much about that application process. So this is for if you're an international student and then once you graduated you stayed in Canada and you're on a work permit and then you decided, you know what, I'd like to actually get permanent residency in this country. That's what the Canadian Express Entry is. That's who it's for. And I think there are other people who could also apply through that channel, but I just want to clarify that this is for the Canadian Express Entry. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, so the timeline, as I said, I started in June 2021. I believe June 2021 I was what was I doing? I took a language test, and I obviously made sure I passed that, and then I think around end of June or early July, that's when I sort of sent in my application. So I created a profile for the Canadian Express Entry, and what that does is once you've sort of written the language test, they ask you a couple of questions that they look for, such as if you have Canadian education, if you have Canadian work experience. There's different questions that you need to answer, and through those questions they then create a profile for you, and your profile is also attached to a score. So how that works is once you're assigned a score, let's say your score was 200 for example, then they do a draw, and what they will say is we will do a draw, and from the draw we have decided that people who have a score between 100 and 350 can apply, or are invited to apply, rather. That's the language that they use. So since my score, say for example in this case, was 200, I basically meet the threshold. So luckily at the time when they did the draw, my profile and my score, it's called a CRS score, basically matched or met the threshold that they were saying they're willing to invite people to apply for. And so I applied I accepted the invitation and basically applied for my PR. That's how it works. So you don't just apply, you need to be invited based on your score. So once that's done, then you start working on the different things that I needed, like the documentation, the medical exams, and so on and so forth, the background checks. So between July up until November, that's kind of what I was working on. So I'd maybe do a medical exam and then they'd give me feedback. Oh, it's all good, can you now send us your fingerprints or something like that. I don't want to go into too much detail because I think it always depends on the country that you're from, and I don't want to say, oh, these are the things that are required, when maybe it may not be the same for your situation. So around November is when I actually had sent all the documentation. So it was kind of now in the immigration's hands, and they were going to decide whether I was going to get my PR application approved or not. So I had been waiting since November, and I finally got an approval letter on email in, I think it was around May, and they were just like, hey, your application has been approved and now you need to just work with us and give us more information so we can send you your PR card. So I finally got my PR card in June. I'm thinking if I should go fetch my card. Okay, 1 second. I wanted to just get my card so that you guys know like this is real, but also I don't think I touched on this at the beginning. It's an exciting achievement, honestly, if you were an international student initially when you came to Canada, because permanent residency means you can stay here permanently. It obviously has its own restrictions. I think from my understanding, if you have PR, I think it's valid for 5 years, and out of those 5 years you need to have spent at least 2 years in Canada. So don't really leave the country is what I understood from so when they send you the PR card, they also explain the restrictions or like the different expectations that they have for you. So it's a very exciting achievement because now I don't have to worry about a visa. I don't have to worry about if my work permit expires, that kind of stuff. Like I don't have to deal with all those immigration documentation stuff that I needed to keep up to date because I'm basically like a permanent resident. So I would highly recommend, like if you're an international student and you are thinking of getting a PR, I think it's good. It's a good thing to have. And yeah, like it just gives you a bit more of a peace of mind while living in Canada. So as I was saying before, so I got the approval email in May, and then in June they sent it to me. So I got it in like maybe I'd say a month. So now I'm gonna jump onto some of the points that I wanted to make about my whole entire experience with applying for PR. Before I jump onto it, please do keep in mind that my experience was based on my home country, which is Swaziland. So if you are not from Swaziland or you're from a different country, I would really highly suggest that you do your research. There's lots of information on the immigration website on what counts for your country. So don't take everything that I'm going to say on this video and think it's going to apply for you. So the first point I have is, and this might shock a few people and some people might even disagree with me, you don't need an immigration lawyer to help you with the PR application process. That's just what I think, and I know that a lot of immigration consultants will also say the same thing. Like it's a very straightforward process, like if you follow the steps. And also if you're not sure, like you would always call immigration and be like, hey, this is my situation and I'm trying to fill up my application for PR and I'm kind of stuck on this. So I just don't think it's worth paying like an immigration consultant or an immigration lawyer for. It's a pretty straightforward process. I did it by myself and I was successful the first time, so I don't think you need an immigration lawyer. But I will say, if you think you are in a very unique immigration situation where you would need a lawyer to sort of understand the law and, you know, help you and represent you represent your case for trying to get a PR approved, of course do it. Like I know of someone who, I think they had a year's experience of work in Canada, but it was from like two to three different jobs, and so to them it just seemed a bit risky to just go ahead and apply by themselves. So they decided to get an immigration lawyer to sort of help them and give them advice on if all the three different jobs could count for work experience in Canada, or if they, you know, like their application would be a weak application, maybe wouldn't be successful. So, but personally I don't think you need one. But again, from case by case, if you think your situation's a bit complicated, then definitely talk to an immigration lawyer and find out how they can help you. The second point is, find a job that meets the Canadian Express Entry requirement. So briefly, if you have a job and you go on to, so immigration has a website, I've forgotten the name, but basically it has a list of different jobs and different job titles and what kind of letter they assign to that job. So for example, if you're working, this is just an example, it's not a real thing. So if you're working as a waitress, you might go and look up on the website, and it will tell you that a waitress is knock B, right? And then if you say, oh, what if I'm a banker? I've been working as a banker for a year. They might say, oh, a banker is knock A. So the jobs that allow you to apply for PR is usually knock A and knock B. If it says knock C or D, it probably will not count for the Canadian Express entry. That's my understanding. So what I would highly recommend is find a job that meets that Canadian Express entry criteria. So make sure that your job is a knock A or knock B. So for me, that's what I did when I came out straight out of university. I made sure I was looking for a job that was a knock A or knock B, and it's harder because it meant sometimes I had to just not reject, but like just not apply for jobs because I'm like, this is not going to help me for PR, so it's a bit of a trade-off there. The other thing that you could do is also, if you really just need money, like I would highly recommend still get a job, whether it's knock A, knock B, or knock C, because sometimes your knock C job, if you work there for 6 months, maybe it could help you get into the next job, which could be a knock A or knock B job. Knock is just, it's NOC. I don't know, I've heard people say knock A, knock B, so that's what I'm gonna call it as well. But it's just the different allocations that immigration gives to different job titles. So make sure yours is a knock A or knock B, or make sure it's one that meets the criteria. So what that means is you could work in a job for a year or 2 years, but if immigration looks at it and says this is a knock C level job, then it won't count and your PR application will be weak, meaning you'll probably have a very low CRS score, right? So it's important to find that when you're looking for a job, keep in mind the knock A, knock B stuff, because it will help you. And I'll also say this, if you get a knock A or knock B job, I would say take it, even if you don't necessarily like it or it's something that you think, I wouldn't want to do this forever. If you want to sort of prioritize getting a PR, because that was my thing, is I really wanted to get my PR first thing before I figure out like what my life in Canada looks like and all of that. If you're sort of thinking along the same lines, I would suggest that you just find a job that's knock A, knock B, work for a year, because all you need is just a year's experience, at least minimum. But obviously I had other jobs prior to that. But yeah, if you could just prioritize that just to get your PR application through, then you can always switch to something else that you enjoy. So yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so the third point is sort of connected to the point I made previously. Obviously, don't go into a job and the first thing you ask is if this job could get you PR. First of all, I don't think a lot of companies think of their jobs like that. Like, they don't really think about PR applications. They just want to get you hired. It's not PR is not something that they're thinking of, right? And so you also don't want to come across as a person who's using the company for just to get your PR. So I would say do not ask about PR at an interview. Maybe ask a month or 2 into the job and just figure out, like, do you know if this job counts for PR? And also check the immigration website to see if it's knock A or knock B. The other thing is, I would say really start early talking to HR and finding out if they've ever helped anyone with a PR application, because some employers are not really aware of this whole PR application and what role they play. So for example, HR will at some point need to write a letter confirming that you've been working for them for a year, and they have to state the different duties and responsibilities that you had in that job, and immigration actually requires that letter from the employer. So just talk to whichever job you're working in and figure out if HR is aware of like their role and if they're willing to support, because sometimes it's not even like the job is not eligible for PR. It's just like HR doesn't know how to help you because maybe you're the first person to work there and also apply for PR. So talk to a few people who've been around, talk to HR, and just figure out if they're even willing to support you with the whole PR application. So point number 4 is pretty obvious. I would say save money. I was really determined to get my PR. So the moment I started working and I found out that the company I was working in could help me get my PR, I started saving money. So I saved, I think if it wasn't $2,000, it was probably 2,500. Just because I looked up how much it cost in terms of application fees, and then I also kind of gauged in, or budgeted for extra fees like medical exams and yada yada yada. So I want to say I spent 2,000, but I might have spent 2,500. So that's the other thing is, it's one thing to want to apply for the PR, but also you must have the funds ready because you have application fees, you have medical exams, you have to do, different tests, and sometimes maybe you need some sort of documentation and it's back home, and so you have to pay for like getting that mailed or whatever, really. So it's just important to have a proper healthy budget so that you're not stuck on the fact that you don't have enough funds to submit your PR application, because they will ask for the application fee once they invite you and you're applying. They do ask you to pay upfront. So yeah, make sure you are prepared for the financial aspect of the PR application. Number 5 is and this was actually a tip that was given to me by my manager at the time when I was applying, when I was thinking of applying for PR, and it is, do not take the IELTS language exam, take the CELPIP. And I completely agree. What my manager actually told me at the time was, she took IELTS like back in the day when she was trying to come to Canada. I think if you're an international student, you're probably used to the IELTS exam, because a lot of international students have to take an English exam before they can start university here. I didn't have to take an exam. So she was like, you're probably going to find the IELTS, I think it's called IELTS exam, IELTS exam, very difficult. You should take the CELPIP one. It's much easier to do. And I know people who took the IELTS exam, didn't really pass, and so had to redo, and so they chose to do the CELPIP exam the second time, and it was much easier and they passed. So I would completely recommend you take the CELPIP language, like English test exam for PR. Do not take the IELTS one, because the IELTS one is just, it's usually challenging, especially if you've never taken an English exam before. Yeah, take CELPIP. So the next point is about, some things that you can do to prepare ahead is, if you could get a criminal record checked, like get your criminal record cleared in your home country, I think that would be good, because I might be wrong on this, but I believe if you do a criminal record check, it probably at least could last you a year. And so if you were able to get it a year ahead, you could still use it for your PR application once you're ready to apply for your PR. I say this because I think depending on your home country, I know some people who had to do their PR application and then were stuck on the criminal record check because they needed like a background check from their home country, and they just couldn't do it online, and so they had to now have to maybe book a ticket and go home, just so they could get their fingerprints, what's the word, I guess scanned. I don't know how a background check works, but basically they had to go home to get that cleared and come back, because either the ones they had from previous years were expired or something like that. Luckily in my case, again, I think it's because of my home country, I was able to do it without having to go home. So like those things, I would say also ask around, find people who've gotten PR who are from the same home country as you, so you can start preparing earlier if you need a background check, if maybe you need to go and see someone, like get a medical test, like the little things that can be done earlier. Like the earlier you do it, the better, of course. So yeah, I think just staying prepared also helps your PR application process move faster, so you're not stuck just because you don't have certain documentation. The next point is also related to the previous point. If you're not sure, because we're not, obviously you're not the first person to write the PR, not write the PR, to write the language exam. If you go on YouTube, there's tons of videos on how to pass, how to prepare for those exams, the writing, the reading section, the speaking section, the listening section. It sounds scary, but honestly, it's not too bad at all. Like it's not an exam where you have to study. Like I didn't have to study so hard for it, but I do remember looking up YouTube videos just to help me understand like how to pass an exam and what they look for. So there's some people who've created some videos to sort of guide you on how to pass the exam. So I would say YouTube has a lot of videos to help you prep. Also, the good thing with CELPIP, I don't know if IELTS would have the same thing. CELPIP also had some sort of study guide you could use that you could buy, and you could use to practice, like, I guess I don't want to say it's exams from the past, but it's like modules similar to what you would expect in the exam. And so I found that when I was taking the exam, they were pretty much similar to the modules I was using to practice, and so obviously that made, you know, taking the exam a bit easier for me. So last but not least, it goes without saying, but I think it's good to be in good financial standing when you apply for your PR. So one of the things that I had to do with my PR application, one of the documents I had to send in, was actually a balance on a statement, like a bank statement showing the balance on my financial accounts, which I don't really know if it made a difference in my application process, but I would imagine it did because they asked for the documentation. So what I would suggest is don't just work for a year and then once you've had like your work experience, apply for PR and stop working. Like it's good to show that you have money in your bank account, you're financially independent. Because they will ask for everything. They'll want to see what's in your savings accounts, what's in your investment accounts. So make sure that you're, like, I'm not saying be rich, but you know, just show that like you have a job, and if they give you your PR, it's not like you're going to be, I think the biggest thing for immigration is they just want to know that you're financially independent and you're not going to be an extra economic stress, like for the economic system. Like you're actually working, maybe you have a business or you have savings or you have investment. So they're kind of just looking into that kind of stuff. So make sure you're in good financial standing, and I think that will also help with your PR application. So that is all I had in terms of some of the things that I learned throughout my PR application process. I hope you guys found this video helpful and informative. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment down below and I will try my best to answer them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and thank you so much for supporting my channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.